Okay, I'm backing up, don't worry. And, okay, here we go. So as I was saying, on the left-hand side, you'll see some of the types of financial aid that's available. Again, in the sources that I already talked about, the Pell Grant is federal, FSEOG is federal, and then Cal Grant A, B, and C, those are state, and then the scholarships, we'll look at those in detail as well on the different sources of scholarships. And then on the right-hand side, you see the self-help aid, or as I like to call it, the investment aid. That comes in the form of loans and work study. The federal direct loan program we'll look at again in detail, but it's a loan under your son or daughter's name, under your student's name. However, there's also a federal plus loan. The plus loan is a parent loan for undergraduate students that's under the parent name. And then we'll look at federal work study, some of the benefits there, and then private loans as well. All right, so we talked about the federal Pell Grant, right? That's one of the main reasons why students complete the FAFSAs, is to see if they are eligible for the federal Pell Grant. So you'll see that for 21-22, the federal Pell Grant has actually increased to up to $6,495. And again, that's based on your financial need when you complete the FAFSA, cost of attendance, and your enrollment, whether it's full-time or half-time enrollment as well. Just if you do complete the FAFSA, one of the main reasons you complete the FAFSA, or one of the bits of information that you will receive that's critical to determine your eligibility, is what's called the EFC. EFC is the expected family contribution. So that's one of the main reasons why you complete the FAFSA, is to get that number. And the government uses that as a data point, the EFC, not to say that's the amount you're expected to contribute towards your son or daughter's education. That's not what they're saying you should be paying out of pocket. Again, they're using it really to determine the types of aid available. Okay, so for example, this federal Pell Grant is strictly based on EFC. And when I say EFC, let me give you, excuse me, the next slide that gives you an idea of what the EFC or the Pell Grant table looks like. So if you look at the top left and you see the EFC range, so if your EFC is 0, and that definitely is a possibility, when you complete your FAFSA, you could get an EFC of 0, then you get the maximum amount, $6,495. You see right next to that, if your EFC is 1, then your Pell Grant amount, decreases by about $50. And then if you look down at the bottom in red, if your EFC is $5,847 or more, then you're not eligible for the federal Pell Grants. And so if your EFC is $6,000, $7,000 plus, you're not eligible for the Pell Grant. So that doesn't mean do not complete the FAFSA if you already know that potentially your EFC is going to be high, because that doesn't disqualify you from other types of aid. But the government does use that EFC as the data point to determine, first and foremost, the Pell Grant. Okay. Now, additional funding, again, from the federal government is the FSEOG. Again, awards can range from $100 to $4,000 per year, depending on the availability of the grants that have been allocated to the school. One of the important things I'm going to talk about, and I was thinking about this before the presentation, is there is a priority deadline which has already passed March 2nd. So hopefully most of you have completed the FAFSA, because some of the funding, for example, the FSEOG funding, is only allocated, a certain dollar amount is only allocated to each year for each school. And so if you don't complete the FAFSA and you are eligible by that March 2nd priority deadline, there is the possibility of not being eligible because you simply missed the deadline because it's on a first come, first serve basis. This is geared more to assist low income undergraduate students who need a lot of financial aid to help pay for college. And so one of those indicators is going to be EFC of 0 or close to 0. All right. So both of those types of financial aid come from the federal government. Okay. Now, as we transition over to the state grants, we have what's called the Cal Grant 8. One of the requirements is that you do have a 3.0 high school GPA. You'll notice that it's required, and we'll look at the application or the process to get that GPA verified. But that is a cumulative GPA, not just your senior year in high school or your junior year in high school. It's all 3 or 4 years, depending on when you apply, cumulative GPA. Now, the amount of Cal Grant A that you can receive really depends on the type of school that you're planning on attending. So you'll see that if you choose to attend a UC, University of California, you can receive up to $12,570 per year. Examples of a UC are, UC Irvine, UCLA, et cetera. So UC Santa Cruz. So those are some of the universities of California. Now, if you attend a CSU, California State University, such as Cal State Fullerton, Cal State Long Beach, et cetera, the amount is half of that, less than half at $5,742 per year. And then if you choose to go to a private nonprofit California college or private independent, such as Whittier College, you can receive up to $9,084 per year, Cal Grant A, and then $8,056 at qualifying WASC accredited for-profit institutions. And WASC is just the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. Okay, so that's the state grant. Now, if you do not have a cumulative GPA of a 3.0, you still are potentially eligible to receive additional funding through the state, and that comes in the form of Cal Grant B. For that, you do need to maintain a 2.0 GPA, and you get a lot less money. So I know that's why you guys are working with your students to get those GPAs up, but you do potentially receive $1,672 for the first year. Now, after the first year, year 2, you'll get the same amount as Cal Grant A. So potentially, if you had a 2.0 GPA or 2.5 GPA and didn't meet that Cal Grant A eligibility, you'll get $1,672 the first year, but as a sophomore, you'll get the Cal Grant A amount. So this amount will increase. Okay, so moving outside of the state, we're going to look at scholarships because there are thousands of scholarships, and there's not one source of funding. There are numerous sources of funding. As I mentioned before, the school that you're applying to is a potential resource. Look at each school's website to see what types of opportunities they're offering, what types of scholarships. In addition to our scholarships, the merit-based scholarships, we have leadership scholarships, talent scholarships, et cetera. Look at your employers. You never know if your employers are offering scholarships. I remember when I was looking at scholarships, my dad came to me and said, our credit union is offering a scholarship. All we need to do is write an essay. And so that was one of the things that, we were able to take an opportunity of, but your employer might be offering a scholarship for your students. Private companies, and I'll look at some options there, nonprofits, communities, religious groups, et cetera, professional and social organizations. So you can do a lot of research on scholarships, there's endless possibilities, but one of the easiest ways to go about looking for scholarships is there's a few resources. The first resource I like to recommend is the U.S. Department of Labor's free scholarship tool. Here's the link It's a long link, but if you just go to careeronestop.org, type in the word scholarship, it'll take you to a list of scholarships, and it really it does a good job of filtering them by type of school you're going to be attending. If you're going to be attending community college, you can sort it by community colleges. If you're going to be a freshman, you can sort it by that. If you're going and pursuing your first bachelor's degree, you can sorted by that, your associate's degree, so you can do a lot of filtering with this tool, okay? It gives you the link to the organization where you're going to be applying. It tells you what the deadline is as well. Many years, many scholarships have various different deadlines. And so it's important to look at what the deadline is because it might have passed already. And then you have what are called scholarship search engines, okay? And so there's a lot of good scholarship search engines out there. There's fastweb.com. They've been around for quite some time. Scholarship America. You might have heard of the College Board as well. You can create a profile. Basically what allows you to do with these search engines is you can sign up, you create a profile, with all your demographic information, a little bit about your background, your family's background, financial information, etc. And then it goes out and potentially finds a match for you. So I have this really, corny analogy, and like to compare this to where, potentially if you were on multiple dating websites, right? So you got your eHarmony, you got your Match.com, etc. You create profiles, doesn't mean that you're going to find a match, 100% guarantee. But if you have multiple profiles with these scholarship search engines, there might be a possibility that you might be eligible to receive a scholarship. Okay. All right. So that first section was all the free money, the gift aid, money that you do not have to pay back. Now we're transitioning over to the self-help aid. Okay. Some of the opportunities that are available to help you pay for college. So as I mentioned, the government actually allows your students to borrow money, not based on their income, not based on their credit score, but based on their need. And the way that's determined is also by completing the FAFSA. And there are two types of loans that students are eligible for. Number one is what we call the direct subsidized loan. So you have to have a need. And again, the way the government determines need, there's a federal formula. You take the cost of attendance, whatever that may be, and it varies school per school. You subtract the EFC, and that equals your need. Okay, so let's just say, for the purposes of this example, your cost of attendance at a school is going to be $50,000. You get a $25,000 scholarship from the school, so that leaves you with the need of I'm sorry, your EFC is 25,000. That leaves you with the need of $25,000. If your school gives you a scholarship of 20,000, then you only have a $5,000 need. Okay, so this subsidized loan is based on need. Now the unsubsidized loan is non-need based. So even if you have a high EFC, you still could potentially qualify for what this is called the direct unsubsidized loan. So the main difference between subsidized and unsubsidized is on the subsidized portion, the government actually pays the interest on the loan while the student is enrolled at least half-time and 6 months after they leave school. And then on the unsubsidized loan, they never pay the interest. So the student is always responsible for the interest from the moment it's dispersed, and it accumulates while they're enrolled in school. Now, we'll tell you that the interest rates have gone down for the last 2-3 years, and these are the lowest that I've seen in about 10 years. The interest rates on both of these loans is 4.3%. Now, it is going to change on July 1st of this year, and again, potentially is going to go down even lower. Repayment on both these loans does not begin until 6 months after separation from school, whether it's graduation or even if the student withdraws from school, the clock starts ticking and repayment will be due 6 months. So again, the loans were created to help students pay for college because we all know if your son or daughter were to walk into a bank without a job, without credit, and apply for a loan, you know, they're number one going to laugh at them, and number two, they're going to say absolutely not, right? Because they're a high risk. But the government, on the other hand, is willing to take that risk because at the end of the day, they're helping them get an education. So these are federal loans. Now I
Mr.
mentioned
Marquez,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. We have about 5 minutes left. I just wanted to give you a time check.
Okay, great, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, so now we have the federal plus loan, direct plus loans. So those are the parent loans for undergraduate students that I talked about earlier. Again, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any other financial aid. Rates, again, are the lowest we've seen in quite some time. Federal work study, again, your son or daughter can get a job, part-time job at school, and they can use the funds to pay for their education as well. They can, in our case, either receive a check or, you know, endorse over the funds to go towards the tuition. All right, how to apply? FAFSA, talked about the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. I looked at or talked about the priority deadlines. You can complete it as early as October 1st of every year through March 2nd. That's the priority deadline, but just because you didn't complete it by the priority deadline doesn't mean you can't complete it. You can complete it up to the, you know, start of school and during the academic year as well. Must be renewed every year. And once you do it 1 year, you'll start getting emails every year as a reminder that you can now, on October 1st, start to complete the FAFSA or renew your FAFSA. So here's the website. Here's the link. Very important because there are some websites that will charge you money, but the FAFSA, as stated in the name, is free. I'm going to go through these slides. There are 7 sections. You'll see the tabs at the top of each page, what section you're in. I'm going to just take you through some of these pages here. I'm going to go through the FAFSA so I can really walk you through next steps. After you sign your FAFSA and you submit your FAFSA, what happens next? Okay, so once the FAFSA is processed, you, both the parent and the student, will receive an email from the U.S. Department of Education. So it's very important that you open up that email. That's going to have what's called a student aid report or a SAR. That summarizes the FAFSA and also gives you that EFC, expected family contribution. Not only do you receive that, but all the schools that you selected on your application will also receive the FAFSA or the student aid report, and they will use that, to create what's called your financial aid award packages, okay? Here's where I do want to just spend a quick minute because this is going to be very important this year, more so than any other year. So the FAFSA captures your family's income information from 2 years ago, 2019. So they use tax information from 2019, not 2020. So you all know 2020 was not a normal year with the pandemic. Many, you know, families lost their jobs or were, you know, furloughed, et cetera. That information is not going to be captured on the FAFSA because they're using 2019's information. So each school should have an appeal process, a financial aid appeal process. So make sure if you were affected by that pandemic economically, then you definitely want to reach out to that school's financial aid office and talk to them about the appeal process. And what the appeal process does is allow us to look at the current financial situation and not at the 2019 financial information. And we can make adjustments to your income on the FAFSA and potentially lower your EFC and help you qualify for some aid. Talked about GPA verification. That's for your Cal grants. And that is it. Sorry I had to rush through that. I know it was partly due to that delay at the beginning. But do you have any questions, Lauren? Do you want to shoot me some of the questions that are being chatted over, or how do you want to do this?
Definitely. We had some great questions come in before you were able to join us that we would love to hear your input on. And our families, if you have any other questions while we're answering those, feel free to put them in the question and answer. So one question that I thought was really wonderful was more students are beginning to take a gap year between high school and college to work or travel. Does anything change about the financial aid process when they do decide to enter college?
It really doesn't. It's a snapshot as effective the date that completes the FAFSA, but there might be advantage or disadvantage depending on what happened 2 years ago as far as the family income is concerned. So you know, let's just say I'm still working, my wife is still working, my daughter decides to take a gap year and then enrolls in school the following year. Well, our financial information really didn't change, so it doesn't really impact um, my ability, number one, to complete the FAFSA, to determine what my EFC is, and to determine the types of financial aid that I'm available for. Now, where it might impact you might be the schools that you're applying for. If they have institutional scholarships, like for example, the at Whittier we have a scholarship, but it is based on your cumulative GPA, et cetera, those factors, not necessarily when you're applying. So it's a good question, but potentially, I mean, the really, you can not apply for financial aid and as an adult go back to school. As long as you complete the FAFSA, your financial aid will be based on when you complete the FAFSA.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then we'll have just one last question as we wrap up. To our guests, I've posted our next sessions in the chat, and those will begin in just a moment at 11:10. But I do want to get this one last question answered by Mr. Marquez. What about COVID affecting FAFSA beyond income assets for persons whose income or assets were lost? Is there any legislation that has passed about this?
No, not yet. The only thing that has passed is the CARES Relief Act, and so current students have been able to benefit from some money, to help them pay towards their any costs related to the pandemic. So that's been in the past. We've received two instances of this aid, but as I mentioned, if there's anything else that impacts you or has affected you financially that cannot be really listed on your FAFSA, then you should definitely reach out to the financial aid office at the school that you're choosing to attend to see what types of processes or applications they have. So for us, we have a financial aid appeal application.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Marquez. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing this important information with our families. To our families at both Marshall and Sotomayor and in the community, there will be continued financial aid sessions for your student, especially as they enter 11th and 12th grade to learn more information. And we also offer support with completing the FAFSA with our college counselors, our academic counselors, and our A through G counselors. We really appreciate you joining us today. And if you'd like to join one of our next sessions, we'd love to have you there. There is a link in the chat you can click for our session about taking the stress out of applying to college, as well as our other session about writing our personal statements. Thank you so much, Mr. Marquez.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Yeah,
Thank you. You too.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we will be ending this session, and you will have to log back in to the session, which either one of the sessions. So please make sure that you take you copy and paste the session IDs that are listed in the chat. So the session will end shortly.